It had taken weeks of planning to set up our anniversary dinner. I'd picked out her favorite restaurant, one she hadn't stopped talking about since our third anniversary. The table was reserved by the window overlooking the city skyline. I'd even gone the extra mile and arranged for the staff to bring out a bottle of wine with a ribbon tied around it, her favorite vintage. As we were seated, everything seemed perfect. Olivia smiled that familiar smile, the one that used to light up my world, and for a moment, I let myself believe we could get through the rough patch we'd been having. I had even gone out of my way to buy a custom necklace, a delicate chain with a small pendant engraved with the date of our wedding. I had my speech prepared, ready to remind her of all we had built together. I thought the evening might rekindle something between us, that it might put an end to the coldness and distance I'd felt from her over the past few months. What I didn't know was that Olivia had her own speech prepared, one that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. Halfway through dinner, just as the wine arrived and I began to raise my glass for a toast, she leaned forward, her expression unsettlingly calm. "I've been cheating on you for 2 years, she said, her voice steady and devoid of emotion, "and I'm leaving you." The world seemed to tilt for a moment, and the glass in my hand hovered midair. I waited for some sign that she was joking, that maybe this was some sick anniversary prank, but her gaze didn't waver, and the cold clarity of her words hung in the air like a dense fog. For a brief moment, I felt an overwhelming rush of anger, betrayal, and humiliation. But instead of letting those emotions take over, I did something that surprised even me. I smiled. Raising my glass as though nothing had happened, I said, "To your new life." My voice as steady as hers. Her brows furrowed slightly, the smallest flicker of confusion crossing her face. She had expected tears, yelling, maybe even begging. She didn't expect composure. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deliberate sip of wine. "So," I asked calmly, "does he make you happy?" Olivia shifted uncomfortably in her seat, the confident facade she had walked in with cracking ever so slightly. "It's complicated," she muttered, avoiding my gaze. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't sure. She thought she was trading up, walking away from a life she deemed predictable and boring. But now, faced with my unexpected reaction, she didn't seem so certain anymore. The waiter approached with the dessert menu, blissfully unaware of the emotional bomb Olivia had just detonated at the table. She waved him off, saying she wasn't interested, but I held up a hand. "I'll take a look," I said casually, flipping through the menu as though nothing had happened. I ordered a slice of cheesecake for myself and asked for a coffee. "You should try the creme brulee," I said, looking up at her. She stared at me, incredulous. "How can you act like this isn't a big deal?" "Because it isn't," I replied, setting the menu aside. "You've made your decision, Olivia. There's no point in me getting upset about it now." That wasn't entirely true, of course. Inside, I felt like my heart was being torn apart, but I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. When the dessert arrived, I excused myself to step outside. The air was cool, and I took a moment to breathe deeply, letting the night calm the chaos in my mind. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Nathan, my lawyer." "Nathan," I said when he picked up. "I need your help. Tonight." He didn't ask questions. That was the thing about Nathan. He understood the gravity of a situation without needing every detail right away. He simply told me to send him what I had, and that he'd be ready to meet in the morning. With that, I made one more call, this time to a private investigator I had hired months ago. Alan had been keeping tabs on Olivia ever since I first noticed the late nights and secretive behavior. "It's happening," I told him. She admitted it. "I need everything we've got ready to go." Alan assured me it was all set, and I felt a small measure of relief. Returning to the table, I found Olivia scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the dim glow of the screen. I could only assume she was texting him, her new, complicated partner. "How will you explain this to the kids?" I asked, sliding back into my seat. Her face faltered, and for the first time all night, she looked genuinely unsure. I don't know," she said. Of course, she didn't. Olivia had planned this betrayal down to the last detail, but she hadn't thought about the consequences. She hadn't considered how it would affect our children, our family. As I finished my dessert, I allowed myself a small, private smile. She thought she had the upper hand, that she was walking away from me with her head held high, but she had no idea what was coming. Returning to the table, I found Olivia hunched over her phone, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen. Her lips twitched with the faintest hint of a smile. She was texting him. She didn't even bother to hide it anymore. Sliding back into my seat, I watched her carefully, noting every small detail. The way she held her phone protectively, the slight blush on her cheeks, the avoidance of eye contact. It was as though she had already erased me from her life. "What will you tell the kids?" I asked casually, breaking the silence. Her head snapped up, and for the first time that night, she looked genuinely caught off guard. I'll figure it out," she stammered. The confidence she'd exuded earlier was beginning to crack, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She hadn't thought that far ahead. Her plan didn't extend beyond her own selfish desires. "You'll figure it out?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "That's reassuring." She glared at me, her defensiveness bubbling to the surface. "You don't need to make this harder than it already is." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Harder for who, Olivia? You?" Her silence was all the answer I needed. The waiter returned to check on us, oblivious to the tension hanging thick in the air. Olivia declined dessert again, but I ordered a second coffee. I had no intention of rushing this moment. As I sipped my coffee, I allowed my mind to wander, reflecting on the months that had led up to this dinner. The signs had been there all along. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she avoided my touch. At first, I thought it was just a rough patch, something all couples go through after years of marriage. I had tried to talk to her, to ask what was wrong, but she always dismissed me. "I'm just tired," she'd say, or "Work has been stressful." But the truth was far more insidious. While I was busy trying to hold our family together, she was out building a new life with someone else. And yet, despite all the evidence, I had stayed silent. I told myself I needed proof, that I couldn't confront her without knowing the full story. That's when I hired Alan, the private investigator. It was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made, handing over my suspicions to someone else, allowing them to pry into my wife's life. But when Alan started sending me photos of Olivia and her lover, laughing together at a cafe, entering a hotel room, kissing in a parked car, I knew I had made the right choice. I had everything I needed: dates, times, receipts, and even recordings of their conversations. She thought she had outsmarted me, but she had no idea how much I already knew. Olivia shifted in her seat, her discomfort growing with each passing second of silence. "Why aren't you angry?" she asked suddenly, her voice tinged with frustration. "Why aren't you yelling or doing something?" I set my coffee cup down carefully, meeting her gaze. "What's the point?" I asked. "You've already made your decision. Getting angry won't change anything." She blinked, clearly unprepared for my calm demeanor. I didn't expect you to act like this." I leaned back in my chair, a small smile playing at the corners of my mouth. "You thought I'd fall apart, didn't you? That I'd make a scene, beg you to stay?" Her silence spoke volumes. The truth was, I had fallen apart. Months ago, when I first realized what was happening, I had spent sleepless nights wondering where I went wrong, questioning every moment of our marriage. But now, sitting across from her, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity. This wasn't about me. It was about her. Her selfishness, her inability to commit, her betrayal. And I wasn't going to let her drag me down with her. The waiter returned with the check, and I reached for my wallet. Olivia started to protest, but I waved her off. "Don't worry," I said. "This one's on me." She frowned, clearly suspicious of my behavior. "You don't have to act so magnanimous." "Magnanimous?" I repeated, laughing softly. That's a big word for someone who just admitted to cheating. Her cheeks flushed, and she looked away, fiddling with the edge of the tablecloth. As I signed the receipt, I glanced at her one last time. "You know," I said, my tone light, "you've given me a lot to think about tonight. I hope he was worth it." Her eyes darted to mine, but I didn't wait for her response. I stood, slipping my jacket over my shoulders, and walked toward the door. Stepping outside, I took a deep breath, the cool night air washing over me. I pulled out my phone and dialed Alan. "She admitted it," I said when he answered. "Good," Alan replied. "What's the next move?" "Send me everything," I said. "Photos, videos, recordings. I want it all organized and ready to go." "Consider it done," Alan said. Ending the call, I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, staring up at the restaurant's glowing sign. Inside, Olivia was probably wondering what I was up to, her mind racing with possibilities. She had no idea that I was 10 steps ahead, that I had been preparing for this moment for months. I walked back inside, sliding into my seat as if nothing had happened. Olivia looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What were you doing out there?" she asked. I smiled, picking up my coffee cup, just enjoying the fresh air. The game had only just begun, and I was ready to play. The restaurant door opened, and a faint chime rang through the air. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. I had planned this moment down to the last detail. I leaned back in my chair, smiling as Olivia glanced toward the entrance. Her face, already pale from the tension between us, drained of all color when she saw him walk in. "You're not leaving just yet," I said, my voice calm but laced with purpose. Her head whipped toward me, panic flashing in her eyes. "What did you do?" she hissed, her voice low but trembling. I gestured toward the man now standing at the entrance, scanning the room. I figured it was time for a proper introduction. After all, you've been seeing him for 2 years. It's only fair that I get to meet him, don't you think? She froze, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words. But there were no words that could save her now. The man spotted us and made his way over, his gait confident but cautious. He clearly didn't know what to expect, though I could see a flicker of excitement in his eyes as he approached the woman he believed was his. "David," I greeted him, standing and extending a hand. He hesitated for a moment before shaking it, his confusion evident. Hi," he said, glancing between me and Olivia. "I wasn't expecting this." "Neither was I said, smiling as I gestured for him to take a seat. "But life is full of surprises, isn't it?" David pulled out a chair and sat down, still unsure of what was happening. Olivia, on the other hand, looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Her hands clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "Marcus," she began, her voice tight with barely concealed anger. "This is unnecessary." I ignored her, turning my attention to David. "So," I said, pouring him a glass of wine, "you're the man my wife has been seeing behind my back. How's that been going for you?" David's eyes widened, and he shot a nervous glance at Olivia. I think there's been a misunderstanding," he stammered. "No misunderstanding," I said, my tone sharp enough to cut through the air. "I know everything. The late-night meetings, the hotels, the lies. Trust me, David, I've done my homework." He looked at Olivia, his expression shifting from confusion to accusation. "You said you were going to tell him," he said, his voice low but strained. Olivia shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't the time or place," she said through gritted teeth. "On the contrary," I said, leaning back in my chair. "This is the perfect time and place. You've been lying to both of us for years. It's time to get everything out in the open." The waiter approached our table, his cheerful demeanor faltering as he sensed the tension. I ordered another bottle of wine and a round of desserts, ignoring the awkward silence that had fallen over the table. As we waited, I decided to break the ice. "So, David," I began, "what is it about Olivia that caught your attention? Was it her charm? Her beauty? Or maybe it was her ability to lie so convincingly?" "Marcus, stop," Olivia snapped, her composure slipping further. David, however, looked genuinely torn. "I thought we were building something real," he said, his eyes locked on Olivia. "You told me you were trapped in a loveless marriage, that he didn't care about you." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? And yet, here we are, celebrating our anniversary. Doesn't seem very loveless to me." Olivia's face burned with humiliation, her hands shaking as she gripped her glass. I didn't think you'd actually show up, she muttered, glaring at David. Well, I got a message saying you wanted to meet, he said, frowning. Was that not you? No, it wasn't, she snapped, her anger now directed at me. You set this up, didn't you? I shrugged, taking a sip of wine. Consider it my anniversary gift to myself. The desserts arrived, but no one touched them. The tension at the table was palpable, each of us caught in the tangled web of lies and betrayal. Tell me, David, I said, setting my fork down. Does it bother you that she's been lying to me for 2 years? David frowned, his confusion deepening. 2 years? She told me this started 6 months ago. I watched Olivia's face crumble, her carefully constructed narrative falling apart in real time. I didn't want to overwhelm you, she said weakly. David's expression shifted from hurt to anger. You've been lying to both of us, he said, his voice rising. Welcome to my world, I said, raising my glass in a mock toast. Olivia opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time all night, she seemed at a complete loss. David stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need some air, he muttered, storming toward the exit. Olivia turned to me, her eyes blazing. What the hell is wrong with you? Me, I said, feigning innocence. I'm not the one who destroyed our marriage. I'm just cleaning up the mess you made. The waiter returned with the check, his eyes darting nervously between us. I handed him my card, offering a polite smile. Thank you for the excellent service, I said. As Olivia fumed silently, I stood and slipped on my jacket. You should go after him, I said, nodding toward the door. You wouldn't want to lose him now, would you? Her glare could have burned a hole through me, but I didn't care. The game was no longer in her control, and she knew it. With that, I walked out of the restaurant, leaving her to deal with the fallout of her choices. I stood outside the restaurant, leaning against the railing, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The evening air was crisp, carrying the faint sounds of traffic and laughter from a nearby bar. I took a deep breath, letting the tension ease from my shoulders. Inside, Olivia's carefully constructed world was crumbling, and it was only a matter of time before the cracks became irreversible. As I turned back toward the restaurant, I saw David standing just outside the door, pacing back and forth. His face was pale, his brow furrowed with a mixture of anger and confusion. You all right there, David? I asked, keeping my tone casual. He stopped pacing and turned to me, his jaw tightening. What are you playing at? He asked. Why would you set all this up? Set it up? I repeated, pretending to think. I didn't set anything up. I just thought it was about time we all had an honest conversation. You know, clear the air. Clear the air, he snapped. You're humiliating her, and me? I raised an eyebrow, crossing my arms. Humiliating you? You've been sleeping with my wife for 2 years, David. If anyone deserves to feel humiliated, it's the two of you. He opened his mouth to respond but closed it again, his face reddening. He couldn't argue with the truth. The restaurant door swung open, and Olivia stormed out, her heels clicking angrily against the pavement. Her face was flushed, her eyes burning with fury. David, let's go, she said sharply, grabbing his arm. He shook her off, stepping back. No, I think I'll stay, he said, his tone cold. I want to hear what else he has to say. Olivia's expression faltered, her confidence wavering. She turned to me, her voice low and venomous. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Enjoying it? I asked, tilting my head. Not particularly. I'd much rather be spending my anniversary with someone who actually respects me. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out. Instead, she took a deep breath, smoothing her hands down the front of her dress. You've made your point, Marcus, she said through gritted teeth. Can we stop this now? Oh, I'm just getting started, I replied, my voice calm but firm. I motioned for David to follow me back inside, ignoring Olivia's protests. He hesitated for a moment before reluctantly stepping through the door. Olivia trailed behind, her movements stiff and defensive. Back at the table, the half-eaten desserts and empty wine glasses sat untouched, a stark reminder of how far the evening had spiraled out of control. I gestured for David to take a seat, and after a brief pause, he complied. Olivia remained standing, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I don't know what you're trying to accomplish, she said, her voice trembling with anger. I'm trying to understand, I said, leaning forward. I'm trying to understand how the woman I married turned into someone who could betray me so completely. Her eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the weight of the confrontation pressing down on him. Tell me, David, I said, turning my attention to him. What did she tell you about me? That I was controlling? That I didn't love her? That I was too busy to notice? He swallowed hard, glancing at Olivia before answering. She said you were distant, that you didn't care anymore, that the marriage was over, but you didn't want to admit it. I nodded, my lips pressing into a thin line. And you believed her. He didn't respond, his silence speaking volumes. Olivia finally spoke, her voice defensive. It's not like that, Marcus. You were distant. You shut me out. I shut you out? I repeated, my voice rising slightly. I worked 12-hour days to provide for this family. I sacrificed time with my friends, my hobbies, everything, so you could have the life you wanted. And this is how you repay me? She flinched, her defenses crumbling. I made a mistake, she said quietly. No, Olivia, I said, shaking my head. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or missing a dinner reservation. What you did was a deliberate choice. A series of choices, over 2 years, to lie, cheat, and destroy everything we built together. David shifted in his seat, his discomfort evident. I didn't know it was that long, he muttered. I turned to him, my gaze steady. And now you do. So tell me, David, does it bother you that she's been lying to both of us? He stared at me, his jaw clenching. Yes, he admitted. It does. Olivia's head snapped toward him, her eyes wide. David. No, he interrupted, standing abruptly. I need to think. He turned and walked toward the door, leaving Olivia and me alone at the table. The silence between us was deafening. Olivia sank into the chair David had vacated, her shoulders slumping as the weight of the evening pressed down on her. Marcus, she said softly, her voice pleading, can we just talk about this? Just the two of us? I stared at her, my expression unreadable. Why? So you can spin another lie? So you can twist the truth to fit your narrative? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. I didn't want it to end like this, she whispered. Neither did I replied, standing. But you made your choices, Olivia. Now you have to live with them. I left her sitting there, the weight of her actions finally sinking in. The door swung shut behind me, and I stepped into the cool night air. David was nowhere to be seen, and for the first time that evening, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. Olivia thought she had control, but now, the narrative was mine. The night air was crisp as I stepped away from the restaurant, the sound of the door swinging shut behind me providing a strange sense of finality. I didn't look back to see if Olivia was still sitting there, her world unraveling piece by piece. I didn't need to. For the first time in months, maybe years, I had the upper hand, and I wasn't about to let go of it. I walked a few blocks before pulling out my phone. Dialing Alan, my private investigator, had become second nature over the past few months. It's time, I said when he picked up. Got it, Alan replied without hesitation. I'll send everything to her and him. It'll be in their inboxes before the night is over. Make it public too, I added, my tone steady but resolute. The people closest to us need to know what she's been doing. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything, I said firmly before hanging up. By the time I returned home, my mind was racing, but I felt strangely calm. The wheels were already in motion, and there was no stopping them now. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. It didn't take long. My phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications, emails, texts, and calls flooding in. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the anonymous account Alan and I had set up weeks ago. The evidence was all there. Photos, text message screenshots, and detailed accounts of Olivia's affair with David. Every lie she had told, every betrayal she had committed. It was all laid out for anyone to see. I watched as the views climbed rapidly, the comments pouring in from friends, family, and acquaintances. Some expressed shock, others disgust. A few, predictably, tried to defend her, but the overwhelming consensus was clear. Olivia had crossed a line, and there was no coming back from it. My phone buzzed again, and this time, I glanced at the screen. It was Olivia. Her name flashing on the screen filled me with a mix of anger and vindication. I let it ring out, but she called again, and again. Finally, I answered, my tone calm but cold. What do you want, Olivia? Her voice was frantic, trembling with a mix of anger and fear. What the hell did you do, Marcus? Why would you do this? Why would I do this? I repeated, leaning back in my chair. Why wouldn't I, Olivia? You spent 2 years tearing apart our marriage behind my back. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? This is cruel, she spat, her composure slipping. You're trying to ruin me. No, I said evenly. You ruined yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth. There was a long silence on the other end, broken only by her ragged breathing. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from me, Marcus? I sighed, setting my glass down on the table. What I wanted, Olivia, was a partner. Someone I could trust. Someone who valued the life we built together. But you made it clear that wasn't who you were. So now, all I want is for you to face the consequences of your actions. The next morning, the fallout began in earnest. Mutual friends started reaching out, expressing their shock and disappointment in Olivia. Some cut ties with her entirely, unwilling to associate with someone who had betrayed her family so deeply. David wasn't spared either. His employer, a prominent law firm, caught wind of the scandal and placed him on indefinite leave. His reputation, carefully built over years, was now in tatters. And Olivia? She tried to fight back, calling mutual friends and family members to plead her case. But the evidence was undeniable, and the more she tried to explain it away, the worse she looked. A few days later, I received a call from David. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. What do you want? I asked, not bothering to hide my disdain. I need to know why you did it, he said, his voice heavy with defeat. Why are everything out like that? I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. Because you needed to know what it feels like, I said simply. You thought you could walk into my life, take my wife, and destroy my family without any repercussions. You were wrong. He didn't respond, but I could hear his shallow breathing on the other end. Finally, he muttered, I never meant for it to go this far. I laughed bitterly. That's the thing about choices, David. They have consequences, whether you meant for them to or not. By the end of the week, Olivia showed up at the house, her face pale and drawn. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her once perfect exterior now cracked and broken. Marcus, she began, her voice trembling. Can we talk? I stood in the doorway, blocking her from entering. There's nothing to talk about, Olivia. You made your choices, and now you're living with them. Please, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll go to counseling. I'll cut off contact with David. Just don't give up on us. I shook my head, my expression resolute. There is no us anymore, Olivia. You ended that the moment you decided to betray me. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she looked truly defeated. Without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing down the driveway. That night, as I sat in the quiet of the house, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was relieved that it was finally over, that the truth was out and the lies were behind me. But another part of me mourned the life I had lost, the marriage, the family, the future I had envisioned. Still, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the one who had destroyed it. That burden was Olivia's to bear, and she would bear it alone. The days following Olivia's public unmasking were nothing short of chaotic. What had started as a carefully executed plan to reveal her betrayal had now spiraled into something far bigger. The ripples of her actions extended beyond our home and touched every corner of her life. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Friends, once loyal to her, began to pull away. Social media posts that once garnered hundreds of likes and comments were now met with silence or outright hostility. The texts and calls she bombarded me with gradually turned from anger and threats to desperation and regret. I didn't respond to any of them. Olivia was a ship sinking fast, and she was discovering just how cold the waters of betrayal could be. For me, the fallout wasn't as chaotic. It was oddly peaceful, a sharp contrast to the storm raging in her world. I moved through my days with a quiet sense of purpose, focused on my children and my work. The kids had been my priority from the beginning. I made sure to shield them from the full brunt of the drama, keeping their routines as normal as possible. But children are perceptive, and they knew something was wrong. "Where's Mom?" my youngest asked one night at dinner, his fork poking at his plate. "She's staying somewhere else for a little while," I said carefully, not wanting to taint their perception of her more than necessary. "But I'm here, and we'll get through this together." He nodded solemnly, clearly not fully understanding but accepting my words nonetheless. My heart ached for them. They deserved better than this. Meanwhile, Olivia's life continued to crumble. She lost her job at the marketing firm. Apparently, David's fall from grace had dragged her down with him. It seemed their company wasn't eager to keep employees embroiled in a public scandal. She reached out to mutual friends, but most of them had already seen the evidence. It was hard to argue against photos, texts, and videos that left no room for interpretation. I heard through the grapevine that she had moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Gone were the days of luxury and comfort she had enjoyed in our family home. Now, she was alone, left to grapple with the reality of her choices. One evening, I received a call from Olivia's sister, Sarah. She and I had always gotten along well, and it was clear she was struggling to reconcile the sister she loved with the woman who had done so much damage. "I don't know what to say, Marcus," she began, her voice heavy with regret. I can't believe she did this. To you, to the kids, to herself." "Neither can I admitted, leaning against the kitchen counter. "She's been calling me non-stop," Sarah continued, begging for help, saying she didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. "What do you want me to do?" I paused, considering her question. "I don't expect you to cut her off," I said finally. "She's your sister, but I can't let her back into my life, Sarah. Not after everything she's done." Sarah sighed. "I understand. Just know that I'm here for you, and the kids if you ever need anything." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. The legal side of things progressed swiftly, thanks to the mountain of evidence I had compiled. My lawyer, Nathan, was a bulldog in court, ensuring that Olivia's infidelity was front and center. When the judge awarded me primary custody of the kids, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I knew I had done everything in my power to protect them and secure their future. Olivia fought hard to retain some semblance of control, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. In the end, the court saw through her attempts to paint herself as the victim. As the divorce was finalized, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a lingering sense of disbelief that this was how our story had ended. One afternoon, as I was unpacking boxes in my new home, I received a text from David. "David ***, can we meet? I need to talk." I stared at the message for a moment, debating whether to respond. In the end, curiosity won out. We met at a small coffee shop on the edge of town. He looked rough, his usually polished appearance replaced by an unshaven face and wrinkled clothes. "I owe you an apology," he said as soon as he sat down. I sipped my coffee, waiting for him to continue. "I didn't know she was lying to me," he admitted. "She told me you were cold, controlling, that you didn't care about her. I believed her. I was an idiot." I set my cup down, meeting his gaze. "You were an idiot," I agreed. "But that doesn't absolve you of your role in all this. You knew she was married, and you pursued her anyway." He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "You're right. I have no excuse." For a moment, we sat in silence, the weight of everything that had happened hanging heavily between us. "What do you want from me, David?" I asked finally. He sighed. "Nothing. I needed to say I'm sorry. For everything." I nodded slowly. "Apology accepted. But don't expect forgiveness. Not yet." "Fair enough," he said, standing to leave. "Take care of yourself, Marcus." "You too," I replied, though I wasn't sure I meant it. That night, as I sat on the couch with my kids, watching their favorite movie, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The fallout had been devastating, but it was also necessary. It had cleared away the lies, the betrayal, and the toxic elements of my life, leaving room for something better. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. The first morning in the new house felt surreal. The air was quiet, the kind of peaceful silence that had been missing from my life for years. The kids were still asleep upstairs, their laughter and footsteps yet to fill the empty rooms. I sipped my coffee by the window, staring out at the neighborhood that was slowly becoming our new home. It wasn't the grand house Olivia and I had shared. This was smaller, cozier, and free of the memories that once haunted every corner of my old life. It wasn't just a house, it was a blank slate. Moving on wasn't easy. It never is after betrayal of that magnitude. But I found solace in the little things: routine, structure, and the unshakable bond one shared with my kids. I focused on building a home for them, piece by piece. Furniture was rearranged, walls were painted, and a new dining table became the centerpiece of our family meals. One night, as we sat around that table eating pizza and talking about their day, my youngest looked up and asked, "Do you think Mom will ever come back?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unspoken until now. I set my slice down, meeting his wide, innocent eyes. "Mom made some choices that hurt our family," I said carefully. "But what's important is that we're safe now, and we have each other." He nodded, though I could see he didn't fully understand. Maybe he didn't need to. It was during these quieter days that I met Claire. She was my neighbor, living in the house next door. We'd exchanged polite nods and hellos when I first moved in, but it wasn't until she saw me struggling with a stubborn lawnmower that we really talked. "Need a hand?" she called out, walking over with a cheerful grin. "I could use all the help I can get," I admitted, stepping back as she inspected the machine. She fiddled with a few knobs, gave it a hard yank, and the motor roared to life. "You've got to show it who's boss," she said with a laugh. I chuckled, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Thanks. I owe you one." "No problem," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Claire, by the way." "Marcus," I replied, shaking her hand. Claire had an easy way about her, the kind of warmth that drew people in. Over the next few weeks, we'd run into each other more often. At the grocery store, at the park with her dog, and even at the local coffee shop. Each time, we'd exchange a few words, and slowly, those brief encounters turned into longer conversations. She learned about my kids, my work, and even a little about what had happened with Olivia. I didn't go into detail, but Claire had a way of listening that made me feel heard. One evening, she knocked on my door with a casserole dish in hand. "I figured you could use a break from cooking," she said, smiling. The kids loved her immediately, and as we sat around the table eating her homemade lasagna, I felt a warmth I hadn't experienced in a long time. Claire became a regular part of our lives, though I was careful not to rush into anything. Trust was fragile, and I wasn't ready to hand it over so easily. But with each passing day, she proved herself in small, meaningful ways. She helped my daughter with a school project, taught my son how to bake cookies, and even lent me her tools when I decided to build a treehouse in the backyard. One afternoon, as we worked on the treehouse together, she paused, looking up at the structure with a satisfied smile. "You're really good at this," she said. "Years of practice," I replied, hammering in another nail. "I used to build furniture before life got complicated." She glanced at me, her eyes soft. "You should get back into it. You're clearly passionate about it." Her words stuck with me, and that night, after the kids were asleep, I found myself sketching designs for a new coffee table. Claire's presence didn't just bring comfort, it brought inspiration. She reminded me of who I was before Olivia's betrayal, before I let life chip away at my identity. I started small, building furniture in the garage during my free time. What began as a hobby soon turned into a side business. Claire encouraged me every step of the way, helping me market my pieces online and even finding local clients who appreciated my craftsmanship. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the kids play in the yard, Claire turned to me and said, "You're a good man, Marcus. Don't let anyone make you forget that." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I had doubted myself, wondering if Olivia's betrayal was somehow my fault. But Claire reminded me that I was worth more than the pain I had endured. By the time the holidays rolled around, our new house felt like home. The kids were thriving, their laughter filling every corner of the space we had built together. Claire joined us for Christmas dinner, bringing gifts for the kids and a bottle of wine for me. As we sat around the table, surrounded by the warmth of family and friendship, I realized how far I had come. This was what a fresh start looked like. Not perfect, not without its challenges, but full of hope and possibility. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The call came late in the evening, just as I was tucking the kids into bed. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to pick up. "Marcus," the voice on the other end began, hesitant and shaky. It was Olivia. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral but firm. "I need your help," she said, her voice cracking. "Everything is falling apart." I let her words hang in the air, refusing to fill the silence. This wasn't my problem anymore. "They froze my accounts," she continued, her desperation seeping through the line. "I can't pay rent. I've been let go from my job and I don't know what to do." Her admission didn't surprise me. I had heard bits and pieces through mutual acquaintances, how David had abandoned her, how her reputation had been destroyed by the very evidence I'd made public. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said flatly, "but this is your mess, Olivia. You made these choices." "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "but I didn't think it would end like this." Her downfall had been swift and brutal. After our divorce was finalized, she struggled to find stable footing. The evidence of her infidelity and deceit had spread far and wide, tarnishing her reputation both personally and professionally. David, the man she had risked everything for, had cut ties with her not long after losing his job. Without his financial support or companionship, she was left to fend for herself. Her once vibrant social circle dissolved overnight. Friends who had once flocked to her dinner parties now avoided her calls. The ones who did stay offered little more than pity, unwilling to get too close to the chaos she had created. She moved into a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of town, a far cry from the luxury she had once enjoyed. Rumors swirled about her struggling to make ends meet, picking up odd jobs to scrape by. Despite everything, Olivia still tried to salvage her image. She wrote a long-winded post on social media, painting herself as a victim of circumstance and misunderstandings. But the internet never forgets, and the comments were quick to remind her of the truth. "Didn't you cheat on your husband for 2 years?" one user asked bluntly. "Maybe try owning up to your actions instead of playing the victim," another wrote. Her attempt to control the narrative backfired spectacularly, and she eventually deleted her accounts altogether. Meanwhile, my life continued to move forward. The kids and I had settled into a comfortable routine, and Claire had become an integral part of our lives. One afternoon, as I worked on a new furniture piece in the garage, Claire walked in holding her phone. "You'll want to see this," she said, handing it to me. It was a news article about David's latest scandal, a lawsuit from his former employer accusing him of embezzlement. His financial troubles had finally caught up to him, and it seemed he was facing serious legal consequences. "Looks like karma's making its rounds," I said, handing the phone back to her. Claire smiled. "It's almost poetic, isn't it?" Not long after, Olivia reached out again, this time in the form of a handwritten letter. The envelope arrived one morning, its edges frayed as if it had been carried through a storm. I debated whether to open it, ultimately deciding that I needed to hear what she had to say. The letter was filled with apologies and regret. She admitted to her mistakes, acknowledging the pain she had caused and the family she had destroyed. "I see now how wrong I was," she wrote. "I thought I was chasing happiness, but all I found was emptiness. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I needed to say I'm sorry." For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but it quickly passed. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, deciding not to respond. Her apologies, while sincere, couldn't undo the damage she had done. Months later, I heard through Sarah, Olivia's sister, that she had moved back in with their parents. They had taken her in reluctantly, their disappointment evident to anyone who spoke to them. She spends most of her days in her old room, Sarah confided during a phone call. I think she's finally realizing what she lost. Good, I said simply. Sarah hesitated. Do you think there's any chance she could rebuild her life? That's up to her, I replied. But she's burned too many bridges to come back to mine. By the end of the year, Olivia had faded into obscurity. The woman who had once commanded attention at every party, who thrived on validation and admiration, was now a shadow of her former self. Her downfall wasn't just a result of my actions. It was a consequence of her own choices, her inability to see beyond her selfish desires. And while part of me felt a sense of closure, I knew that true peace came not from her suffering but from the life I had rebuilt for myself and my kids. That evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Claire joined me with 2 mugs of coffee. Penny for your thoughts? She asked, sitting beside me. I smiled, shaking my head, just thinking about how far we've come. She reached for my hand, her touch warm and reassuring. You deserve this, Marcus. All of it. And for the first time in years, I truly believed her. The house was quiet, bathed in the golden glow of the late afternoon sun. The kids were at a friend's birthday party, giving me a rare moment of solitude. I sat in my workshop, sanding down a piece of walnut for a custom coffee table. The rhythmic scrape of the sandpaper against the wood was meditative, a steady reminder that rebuilding something broken takes time, effort, and care. This had become my sanctuary. Whenever the weight of the past threatened to creep back in, I would retreat to the workshop, letting my hands create what my heart was still learning to process. Claire arrived later that evening, balancing a casserole dish in one hand and a bouquet of flowers in the other. You didn't have to do all this, I said, taking the dish from her and setting it on the counter. You're right, I didn't, she replied with a teasing smile. But I wanted to. Plus, the kids love my lasagna. She wasn't wrong. By the time dinner was over, the kids had polished off every last bite, leaving me with little more than a slice to tuck away for lunch the next day. As we cleaned up the kitchen together, Claire looked over at me, her expression serious. You're doing an amazing job with them, she said. Thanks, I replied, drying a plate. I just want to make sure they feel safe and loved. After everything they've been through, they deserve that much. And so do you, she said softly, her eyes meeting mine. Our relationship had grown slowly, rooted in trust and mutual respect. Claire never pushed me to open up about my past, but when I did, she listened without judgment. I didn't think I'd ever be able to trust someone again, I admitted one evening as we sat on the porch, the kids already in bed. After Olivia, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to try. She reached for my hand, her grip warm and steady. Trust takes time, Marcus. And so does healing. But you're stronger than you think. Her words stayed with me long after the conversation ended, a quiet affirmation that I was moving in the right direction. One morning, Claire showed up with a stack of business cards and a folder of ideas. I was thinking, she began, spreading the cards out on the table. Your furniture is incredible, and people should know about it. Why not turn this into a full-time business? I laughed, shaking my head. Claire, I'm barely keeping up with the few orders I have now. Exactly, she said, her eyes sparkling with determination. There's a demand for what you do. We just need to organize it. She wasn't wrong. With her help, I launched a small business, creating custom furniture pieces for local clients. Claire handled the marketing, setting up a website and managing social media, while I focused on the craftsmanship. Within months, the business took off, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose beyond just surviving. The kids thrived in our new routine, too. My son joined a local soccer team, while my daughter developed a passion for art. Claire became an integral part of their lives, attending games and helping with school projects. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, my daughter looked up and said, Claire, are you going to marry Dad? The question caught us both off guard. Claire's cheeks turned pink, and she glanced at me, unsure how to respond. Well, she began, choosing her words carefully, that's something your dad and I would need to talk about, but I'll always be here for you, no matter what. Her answer seemed to satisfy my daughter, who nodded and went back to her plate. But later that night, as Claire and I sat on the couch, I couldn't help but bring it up. They love you, you know, I said, turning to her. And so do I. She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. I love you too, Marcus. All of you. The moment felt like a turning point, a confirmation that the life we were building together was real and lasting. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The scars of the past were still there, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they served as a reminder of how far I had come, and how much I had to look forward to. Months later, we stood in the backyard, watching the kids chase fireflies under a canopy of stars. Claire wrapped her arms around me, her head resting against my chest. Do you ever think about her? She asked quietly. Sometimes, I admitted, but not the way I used to. She's a part of my past, and that's where she'll stay. Claire nodded, her fingers lacing with mine. I'm glad you found peace. So am I said, tightening my hold on her. The night ended with the kids curled up on the couch, their laughter still echoing in the corners of the house. As I watched them, I realized that hope and healing weren't just concepts, they were choices. I had chosen to fight for a better life, for myself and for my family. And in doing so, I had discovered something I thought I'd lost forever, joy. 5 years had passed since the dinner that had shattered my world and set me on a path of rediscovery. Time had a way of smoothing the rough edges of the past, but the lessons it left behind were etched deeply into who I had become. The house was alive with laughter and movement. Claire, now my wife, was in the kitchen baking cookies with the kids, their giggles spilling into the living room. I sat at my desk, going over some design plans for a new client, but the sounds of my family kept pulling my attention. It was the kind of life I had once dreamed about, a life filled with love, trust, and simple joys. And it was one I had fought hard to build. Looking back, it was hard to believe how much had changed. Olivia had reached out a few times over the years, always with some variation of the same message. regret, apologies, and the hope for a conversation. I never responded. The last I heard, she was still living with her parents, working a series of odd jobs to make ends meet. The glamorous, carefree life she had chased with David had long since crumbled, leaving her with little more than memories of what she'd thrown away. David, too, had faded into obscurity. His legal troubles had cost him his career and reputation, and he had relocated to a different state. As far as I was concerned, both of them were ghosts, remnants of a chapter one had long since closed. Claire's gentle laugh pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, flour dusting her cheeks and a tray of cookies in her hands. "Want a taste test?" she asked, holding out the tray. I took one, biting into the warm, gooey chocolate chip cookie. "Perfect," I said, grinning. She leaned against the doorframe, watching me with that familiar, steady gaze. "You okay?" I nodded, just thinking about how lucky I am. "You deserve it," she said simply. The kids burst into the room moments later, pulling me toward the backyard where we had started planting a small garden together. My son proudly showed me the first sprouts poking through the soil, while my daughter asked a million questions about how plants grow. It was in these small moments that I found the most peace. Life wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it was full of meaning. The scars from the past had faded into the background, overshadowed by the warmth of the present. Later that evening, as the kids slept and Claire and I sat on the porch, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. "You know," I said, breaking the comfortable silence, "there was a time when I thought I'd never feel this kind of peace again." Claire reached for my hand, her touch grounding me. "But you made it," she said softly, "and you built something beautiful out of the ashes." I nodded, my heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you." She smiled, her eyes shining in the moonlight. "You would have. I just helped you see what you were capable of." The next day, I sat down to write a letter, not to Olivia, but to myself. It wasn't about blame or anger. It was about gratitude. Gratitude for the strength I had found, the lessons I had learned, and the life I had rebuilt. I ended the letter with a simple promise. I will never forget where I've been, but I will always focus on where I'm going. The years stretched ahead, full of possibility. There would be challenges, no doubt, but I felt ready to face them. As I tucked the letter into a drawer and turned to the sound of Claire calling me for dinner, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This was my life now, a life I had fought for, earned, and cherished. And as I joined my family at the table, the laughter and love surrounding me, I knew one thing for certain. The best chapters of my story were still being written.